I want to box on the box, rock and celluloid, Bob Brack for short. So today I'm doing a Master of Cinema on one of my favourite directors, Michael Mann. So he's born in 1943. He actually studies film in London. And some of his contemporaries are Alan Parker, Ridley Scott and Adrian Lyne. So stylistically, Mann's style is kind of more in keeping with those guys, the backgrounds in advertising, with the types of visuals he uses. So even though he's born the same time as guys like Spielberg and Lucas, you wouldn't lump him in with those movie brats. So he actually works for World in Action, I think. He does various stuff, makes a couple of short documentaries and moves back to America in his late 20s. Starts working in TV, writing for Starsky and Hutch. Writes a pilot episode of Vegas, if you remember, starring Robert Ulrich. And then he does a TV film, and this is his first thing to really break out. It's the Jericho Mile, so it wins 5 Emmys. And it's about a guy who's training for the Olympics, but he's a criminal because he's a great runner. And he runs in a prison yard, and his talent gets spotted, and he gets offered a shot at the Olympics. But it doesn't pan out. But what's interesting about this is it's filmed in Folsom Prison with real inmates. And this shows Mann's background in documentaries about bringing authentic realism, but in particular authentic realism to aspects of criminality and the prison system. This is something quite important that flags up in other films. So after that, he does his debut film, which is Thief, starring James Caan. So basically James Caan plays a professional safecracker who works on his own, but then he gets starting to work with a crime boss played by Robert Protsky. So he's kind of operating, moves into another level of the criminal system, but then obviously he has to give his takings away to Protsky, some of them, but they kind of set up jobs for him. But then he doesn't like it, and they come to blows. But this establishes a few visual motifs and a couple of themes of Mann's work. It's shot at night a lot. It uses neon. It has an electronic score by Tangerine Dream, which is something he will use in later films, electronic scores and pop and rock music. The character has a criminal professional code that he the job he does at a high level. This codes of professionalism is something you can trace back to the influence of the filmmaker Howard Hawks. I suspect that Mann's probably picked up on that. The idea being, whether it's the cops or the robbers, they operate in a certain way. They work as a team, and they have certain standards, and if you fall below those standards, you won't get to work with a crew, so to speak. And the character's got an existential drive. He actually has his life kind of distilled onto like a photo, and on this photo he says to the Tuesday Weld character, who's the female lead, this is what I this is everything that matters to me. And that's something that will pop up in Mann films. Characters are philosophical, existential. The kind of they do these jobs and so on, but they're kind of questioning things, or they strip away all the complex aspects of life into some kind of simple thing that they can deal with. So this film's not a hit, but I think it gets good recognition at Cannes. It's a really good film. It's well worth checking out, and it forms a kind of trilogy with the film Manhunter and the film Heat, in my opinion, in a loose way. So his next film's weird. He just takes a total left turn. He does a film called The Keep, which is a film set in World War II. Nazis discover a kind of power inside a cave in a quarry. It's kind of mystical. Scott Glenn plays this kind of mystical bloke who travels to the location of the keep. It's got a really cool opening of trucks going through the rain and wet mud with a Tangerine Dream playing. I think it's filmed in Wales as well, so bringing it back to England. It's got some interesting sequences. It's just I've never quite got it, but it has its fans. It is interesting, but it's not a typical Mann film. So then at this point he also develops the TV show Miami Vice. So this real groundbreaking show back in its day. Great use of rock music, top casting of Don Johnson, Philip Michael Thomas. And I think this establishes his kind of cops layout that he will use later on in a film like Heat. You've got like Castillo, the head, the two, Sonny and Tubbs, Crockett and Tubbs. You've also got like strong female characters as well, and they're all part of the crew, the professional crew. Yeah, again, that existentialism thing comes in, in the opening pilot. Crockett's driving his Ferrari Testarossa silently to the strains of Phil Collins in the Air Tonight down the freeway, and then he pulls over and phones his ex-wife and just says, could you tell me, was it real what we had? And it's got that thing, it's got moments of sort of deep contemplation for characters. Mann's quite happy to let the sequence linger and let the music flow and let the visuals envelope. It's easy to not Miami Vice now as a very 80s thing, but it really was, certainly his first 2 or 3 series, it was, one of the great shows of its day. So his next thing he does, this is the first time I became aware of him as a filmmaker. I knew his name, Michael Mann, from watching Miami Vice. He does the film Manhunter. Obviously this is key because it's the first appearance of the character Hannibal Lecter. In this instance, the actor playing him is Brian Cox, and the guy on the case, Will Graham, goes to visit him, and it's a really chilling scene. So Will Graham is played by William Peterson, and Hannibal Lecter is played by Brian Cox. But the William Peterson character is after the Tooth Fairy. He's after a different serial killer, and that's why he's got the advice of Hannibal Lecter. What's interesting with this establishes, although he's FBI William Peterson, he establishes the cop and the villain thing that will play out in other films. And the Hitchcocking thing are doubling really. But it's got really cool visuals. The bits with Hannibal Lecter are actually shot in an art gallery. It's all modern and austere. And Michael Mann's one of the great shooters of architecture. So this is bringing in a bit of European influence. So the original master of that was Michelangelo Antonioni. If you're not convinced, watch the climax of Zabriskie Point, how he shoots that building. But Mann has a way of framing buildings and finding something in them. And he kind of reminds me when I was younger, I used to look at the artwork of Edward Hopper, and he kind of reminds me of that. He can take something like a petrol station or something like that, or a diner, and just frame it a certain way so it just becomes something else. So it's fantastically shot, that sequence. It's really good. It's got Joan Allen in an early role. Dennis Franz. He uses like electronic rock music score. Actually he uses Inagala Davida by Iron Butterfly really well. I don't think it's as good as Silence of the Lambs. I think Silence of the Lambs works better as a Lecter film because Jonathan Demme uses more horror film tropes, and he uses pure Hitchcockian point of view shot and doubling in that. But I've always liked this film. It's sort of a cult masterpiece. It is a key Mann film, and if you look now, you've got Thief, which is like the criminal film. This is bringing the cops and sort of the robbers, but it's a serial killer. So he's developing his ideas. The film's not a hit, but he gets amazing reviews, this film. So he's still not had a hit. There's a 6-year gap. And then he takes a left turn, but a brilliant left turn. He makes an adaptation of James Fenimore Cooper's The Last of the Mohicans with Daniel Day-Lewis. And this is one of the great romantic, epic period films. I think sometimes, with what comes next, you tend to forget how good this film is. I mean, the photography by Dante Spinotti is staggering. I'm just checking Dante Spinotti does it. Apologies. Dante Spinotti is his key cinematographer. Beautiful score by Trevor Jones, majestic climax. One of my favourite shots in this film, again, it's the architecture thing. It basically, some soldiers run over a bridge, over water, and it's just the way he frames it. It's just, and the lighting and everything's beautiful. I think in this, actually, I didn't realise Daniel Day-Lewis, there's one bit where he's running along and he reloads his musket while he's running. And I saw an interview with Tom Hiddleston just saying, like, that just blows me away as an actor. And that's the thing with this. I mean, Day-Lewis is kind of playing the romantic lead, but even then he's gone totally method. I mean, he's totally thrown himself into it. It's got a great cast. Madeline Stowe's really good. Jodie May. Forgetting the name of the English actor in it, Stephen Somerville. He's good. And the great Wes Studi plays a real vicious Native American, but superb visuals. I can't believe. I mean, I'm just going to check sort of the Oscar noms on this. I can't actually see how anything really. I think he got a couple, maybe. So it's amazing. I mean, a film like this should have been, it should have been nominated best film, best director at least, maybe supporting actress, cinematography, musical score. Um, like I say, yeah, there's nothing flagging up here. And there's nothing flagging up for the next film, which is one of the great films of the latter part of the 20th century. It's the best film of the last 25 years. And I think this is the film that Mann's reputation not rests on, but this is the film where people just go, oh God, that film's so good. That film changed my life, and it's called Heat. So he did a dry run for this with a TV film called LA Takedown, which is pretty ropey, but literally Heat is an expensive shot-for-shot remake of that. It's the first film to bring in Pacino and De Niro together on screen, briefly in a couple of scenes. It's incredible. I've talked about this in more detail on another video, but the synthesis and sound of image comes together in this. So everything's been working towards. You got incredible neon lit LA scenes. You've got brilliant bits where he shoots architecture amazingly. He actually uses some digital video, I think, in this as well for some scenes. I think there's a scene where De Niro shoots Danny Trejo's character. The cast is amazing. Career best performances with Val Kilmer, Tom Sizemore, Ashley Judd. De Niro, he's done some really good stuff since then, but I think this is one of his great performances, and Pacino not far behind. Amazing dialogue, great music. Just bringing the criminal thing from Thief with the cop thing from Miami Vice and Manhunter, and putting it together for one of the great American crime masterpieces. I can't say enough about this film. I could do a whole thing on it, but no Oscar nominations, none of this, none of that. But what do people know? It's one of the great films. One of the great films in American cinema, great crime films anyway. So I love that, and it's had 2 hits now. Actually, it's actually getting some commercial success. The last of Mohicans grosses its box office in North America $75.5 million on a $40 million budget. And it does quite well worldwide, and then Heat grosses nearly $190 million worldwide on a $60 million budget. So he's bankable now, and his next film is the one that finally gets him an Oscar nomination, at least The Insider. This also is a star-making role for Russell Crowe. Obviously, Gladiator's the kind of superstar making role, well, briefly. But this gets a lot of nominations: Best Picture, Best Director, Best Actor, Russell Crowe. Pacino's really good in it as well, and Christopher Plummer's great. It's got great acting. It's about the corruption in the tobacco industry, based on a news story. And again, he's bringing his documentary background into this, and news media from World in Action, I think. Does he write this as well? Hold on a sec, I'll just apologise about this, but I just want to check, because he does write stuff as well. And yes, it is co-written with Eric Roth. Sorry about that. Yeah, some great scenes in this. There's a great bit where Pacino takes a phone call sort of late in the evening, but it's kind of still light, and he's kind of stood in the ocean, and it's all beautifully lit. But it's a slightly different animal to his previous films. But so he gets a really good trilogy here of films. Last of Mohicans, Heat, Insider, 3 great films, and Manhunter, very good. So next, he kind of comes unstuck, or starts to come unstuck, in my opinion. He directs the film Ali. When I read he was going to do this, I was so excited. I loved the documentary When We Were Kings, and I was looking forward to seeing this fictionalised depiction of Ali and his comeback. Not fictionalised, his biopic, and his comeback and the rumble in the jungle. The probably the key. One of the key moments in sporting history, maybe all sporting history. But Will Smith's really good, and Jon Voight. Actually, forgot to mention how incredible is Jon Voight in Heat, but he does a great performance, Oscar-nominated performance as Howard Cosell, the sportscaster in this. Jamie Foxx is in it as well, and he's really good as Ali's trainer. Yeah, Jamie Foxx will appear again in a second, but yeah, it just didn't quite hang together. I think the problem is When We Were Kings is so good. That's the great Muhammad Ali film you need to see. So I was a little disappointed. Some quite interesting bits with digital video where he's shooting the boxing match and he gets really close quarters, a lot of kind of handheld stuff where he's right in the action, and that's interesting. But I still felt the rumble in the jungle just wasn't staged quite how I thought it was going to be. So next he moves on to Collateral. Recently, I saw the pictures and recently rewatched it, and I kind of feel the same. I like it. It's a great neon film. He shot it virtually. I think it's virtually all at night. Starts off in the day. Tom Cruise is good, playing the bad guy. Jamie Foxx is very good. It just feels this. He's kind of starting to go back over some things. He has the Tom Cruise character is this kind of philosophical hitman, again, an existential thing, and he has various quotes about Rwanda and coincidence and stuff like that. It's got, and it kind of ends up with a kind of horror movie type of climax. It's got a kind of hot trope on the haunted house, and then again, it's the finish of it, reflects some philosophical thing Tom Cruise has been talking about in the back of the cab. There's a bit where they go in a nightclub, there's a big shootout, and I felt that rang hollow because Michael Mann, his characters are so professional. The Tom Cruise character, why would he go in a nightclub and start, firing gun everywhere? It wasn't realistic, but it's well shot. Again, I think there's some digital video sequences on this as well. He got Best Director, Hollywood Film Award, National Board of Review Award for Best Director as well. Venice Film Festival Digital Award, and he was nominated for Best Director, BAFTA and stuff. No Oscar nomination. I'd give it a 7 out of 10. So next he returns to Miami Vice. He makes a film version of Miami Vice. Again, I was initially excited by this, and I thought the casting initially was good of Colin Farrell and Jamie Foxx, but Colin Farrell's not a movie star. This needed someone with a really powerful charisma in a Crockett role. Jamie Foxx is good, but although he gets underused, I feel. Different cinematographer, Dion Beebe, on this. But it didn't do well. The budget was 135 million and only grossed 164 million. I think the problem with this is he starts to replay tropes. He's kind of remaking Miami Vice as a kind of replay of Heat, for starters. Initially, it opens really good. There's a bit with John Hawkes, the actor John Hawkes, and he's a witness, and his family gets murdered, and then he kills himself in front of a truck, and that's all really well handled. There's a fantastic shootout at the end, not near the end, and again there's a mixed crew of male and female, and actually a female character takes the sort of kill shot, which is really good. But the only problem is the gun battle in Heat. You had this staggering gun battle. It's one of the finest achievements in action filmmaking, in all filmmaking, the gun battle in Heat. And it's like, although this is amazing, it's like he's trying to top that. And then the Colin Farrell character, the Crockett character, is prone to lots of philosophical musings, again, an existential thing, but it just rings hollow this time. So I've seen this a couple of times, but yeah, it didn't quite happen. So then he does Public Enemies, which is a biopic of John Dillinger, again, interesting. But again, he's kind of replaying the Heat thing, there's cops and robbers. You've got Christian Bale's FBI man on the trail of the great Depression-era gangster, John Dillinger, played by Johnny Depp. It's good to see Johnny Depp actually turn up and act instead of doing Jack Sparrow or bloody Willy Wonka or whatever. It is a good film. It's just not great. $100 million budget, $240 million gross. So, it just about made its money back. I was kind of a 6, 7 out of 10, and it is good. It's good that he's kind of gone into a different genre of the crime film, but a different era. And of course, it's got another shootout at the end, or no, it's in the middle, I think. Apologies, but it's really good. It's kind of different. It's in some woods and. But again, he's kind of riffing on the Heat. He can't top it. It's a better film than Miami Vice, but probably not quite as good as Collateral. I don't know. Again, I'd have to watch it again. Then you've got a big gap of 6 years. I think the problem for a filmmaker like Mann is the types of films he wants to make, and the budgets that they cost. There's a risk they won't make their money back, or they'll just break even. Hollywood doesn't want to invest in that. I mean, really, he's 77 now. I hope maybe he goes to Netflix and does something. I don't know. But for me, it kind of feels that the time's past where Hollywood's going to give him the money to do what he wants to do. Black Hat kind of came and went. $70 million budget, so cheaper, but it only grossed $20 $20 million. I think the key problem with this is Chris Hemsworth 4. Chris Hemsworth's a good actor. He's a good screen presence, but he's not a star. That's a problem with a lot of film actors now. The film actors are not stars, and it needs a big charisma in this. Again, there's some bits of this where it's kind of going down the internet because it's about hackers. And it's got these kind of CGI shots which I feel are a bit hackneyed for a director of his level. Again, it's got some great neon shots at night. It's got really good location work where it's moving around. And yes, there's a tense shootout. That's really well done. I would say it's not as good as the shootout in Heat. It's not as good as the one in Miami Vice. Maybe it's better than one in Public Enemies. But again, again he's riffing on something he's done there before. I did not enjoy the film, but it just kind of came and went. It just felt like in the end it was a bit too slight for Michael Mann. So really, since The Insider, it has to be said he kind of has tailed off. Although Collateral was a good sized hit. I'm just gonna check that gross on Collateral, just out of interest. Yeah, it was $65 million budget Collateral, and it grossed $220 million. So, he had a good hit there to build on. But it just hasn't happened with his last few films. Like I say, I'm kind of hopeful that maybe he could go to someone like Netflix and get the backing. He was linked with like a period film. I don't know if it was a Roman epic or something like that. Which would be really cool to see him, bring his Last of the Mohicans chops back in. But yeah, it's difficult. He's 77. Hopefully he's in good enough health, and hopefully he can get the backing to do another shot. He's actually done quite a few films. A producer, Ford versus Ferrari, was an executive producer. A film I enjoyed, The Kingdom, he was the producer on that, and that's got some quite sort of Michael Mannish sequences in it as well. So Michael Mann, in summary, he is a great filmmaker. He is a very influential filmmaker just for Heat alone. I mean, the opening of the Dark Knight, the Christopher Nolan film, the Batman film, is basically a tribute to the heist sequence in Heat. And for Heat alone, he will be influential the rest of his life. People will study and watch that film. And the Mann look and the stylistic innovations he has, you will see those being adopted by other filmmakers as we move through film. Cheers, hope you enjoyed that. Thanks very much.